Empire of ruin. The global impact of European colonialism. European colonialism stands as one of the most destructive, far-reaching, and complex forces in world history. Cloaked in the language of civilizing missions and driven by greed, competition, and a racial hierarchy rooted in white supremacy, European powers carved up entire continents, from Africa and Asia to the Americas and Oceania, leaving behind war, genocide, economic devastation, and cultural erasure. The legacy of colonialism continues to shape global inequality, geopolitical conflicts, and racial injustices today. This article delves deep into the global scope of European colonial expansion, its brutal practices, and the enduring consequences for indigenous peoples and formerly colonized nations. The ideology of conquest, racism, religion, and greed. Colonialism was never just about land. It was about power, control, and the assertion of white European superiority over lesser races. Religious justification. Missionaries followed conquistadors, claiming to bring Christianity to heathens. This spiritual colonization often came with forced conversions and destruction of local beliefs. Scientific racism. Enlightenment-era pseudoscience ranked people into a racial hierarchy, with Europeans conveniently at the top. Economic greed. Colonies meant access to cheap labor, raw materials, and new markets. Whole economies were built on slave labor and the extraction of wealth from the colonized. 2. Africa, the ravaged continent. The scramble for Africa, 1881 to 1914. At the Berlin Conference of 1884 to 85, European powers divided Africa without any African consent. By 1914, 90% of the continent was under European rule. Congo Free State, Belgium King Leopold II's personal colony, became a site of genocide. Up to 10 million Congolese were killed through forced labor, mutilation, starvation, and disease. Hochschild, King Leopold's ghost. Herero and Nama genocide. Germany, in what is considered the first genocide of the 20th century. Germans in Namibia exterminated up to 80% of the Herero and 50% of the Nama people through forced starvation and concentration camps, BBC. South Africa, British and Dutch settlers enslaved local populations, culminating in apartheid, a legacy of racial segregation that lasted until 1994. 3. Asia, divide, rule, exploit. European colonialism in Asia involved both military conquest and economic domination. India, British Empire. Famine and deindustrialization. British policies caused repeated famines, especially the Bengal famine of 1943, which killed over 3 million people. Madhusri Mukherjee, Churchill's secret war. Resource extraction. India went from a major global exporter to a raw material colony producing tea, opium, and cotton for British consumption. Cultural destruction. The English language, legal system, and Christianity were imposed while ancient institutions and crafts were systematically dismantled. Indonesia, Dutch Empire. The Dutch East India Company, VOC, created a brutal system of forced cultivation and labor. Resistance, such as the Java War, 1825 to 1830, was crushed with massacres. Natural resources were looted, especially spices and later oil, while Indonesians remained impoverished. 4. The Americas, a holocaust of civilizations. Colonization of the Americas led to one of the most catastrophic population collapses in human history. Genocide of indigenous peoples. 90% of the indigenous population, an estimated 50 to 100 million people, died from war, slavery, and disease brought by Europeans. David Stannard, American Holocaust. Atlantic slave trade. 12 to 15 million Africans were kidnapped, sold, and shipped across the Atlantic. Millions more died during raids, marches, and the Middle Passage. Cultural erasure. Entire languages, religions, and societies were wiped out, replaced by Christianized and Europeanized structures. V. Australia and the Pacific, terra nullius and cultural erasure. Aboriginal genocide. British settlers in Australia used the doctrine of terra nullius to justify taking Aboriginal land. Massacres, forced removals, stolen generations, and cultural destruction followed. New Zealand, Maori land wars and British treaties, like the Treaty of Waitangi, facilitated land seizure and British rule. Pacific Islands, used for plantation economies, military outposts, and nuclear testing, e.g., French testing in Tahiti, American in Bikini Atoll. 6. Enduring legacy. What colonialism left behind. Colonialism officially ended in the mid-20th century, but its ghosts remain. Borders drawn in blood. Arbitrary colonial borders caused ongoing conflicts, e.g., Rwanda, Kashmir, Sudan. Economic dependency. Former colonies often remained tied to the colonial economy, exporting raw materials, importing finished goods. Psychological trauma and racism. Colonized peoples internalized inferiority. Colonizers institutionalized white supremacy. Global inequality. The modern global north-south divide is a direct result of colonial theft and exploitation. 7. Reparations and accountability. While countries like Germany have begun reparations, e.g., to Namibia, most former colonial powers have not acknowledged their crimes, let alone made amends. Britain still refuses to apologize for the Bengal famine or Mau Mau massacres. France clings to its colonial past with pride, even as it controls overseas territories. Belgium only recently acknowledged its atrocities in the Congo, with no meaningful reparations. Conclusion: memory, justice, and the future. European colonialism was not a noble mission of civilization. It was a project of conquest, genocide, and greed. It built the wealth of Europe on the corpses of millions and left behind a broken world struggling to recover. The least the world can do is remember truthfully, seek justice where possible, and dismantle the systems of inequality that colonialism created. Until the lions have their own historians, the history of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. African proverb: